Only on Fox 10 Investigate, some funeral home owners in Mohave County say that officials made a mistake deciding who should run the medical examiner's office. It's been an ongoing issue for a while, but this time the county contracted with a company that owns several funeral homes in the area. Specifically, the president of that company is now in charge of the medical examiner's office. Competing mortuaries have brought up these significant concerns, claiming there's a conflict of interest. Fox 10 investigator Justin Lum has part 2 of dealing with the dead.
How would John Hassett describe himself?
A charismatic entrepreneur.
He's a businessman with multiple titles, the director of operations for the Mohave County Medical Examiner's Office and the CEO of Serenity Memorial Group, a company that owns 5 funeral home locations in the same county. His mortuaries, Arizona Affordable, Desert Lawn, and Mohave Memorial, are on a rotation schedule provided by the public fiduciary. So is the competition. The purpose of the list is to create an even playing field for eligible funeral homes to care for decedents who don't have families or financial resources for a burial, or their families just don't have a preference.
If someone has an unattended death with law enforcement, if they have a hospice death and the family says, you know, I don't have any pre-need arrangements, I don't have any, I don't know who to call, I'm not from the area or something along those lines, it would go to the rotation funeral home.
Death calls come in, but funeral homeowners like Bradbury Memorial say since Hassett took over operations at the OME,
the calls dropped significantly.
Naomi Bradbury Marchand believes the playing field is not fair at all.
Are you going to allow everybody the opportunity, the same opportunity, or are you going to be taking a lot of that business to grow your personal business?
The medical examiner's office releases online data showing the amount of month-to-month calls, but multiple funeral home owners, including Bradbury Marchand, say their internal records don't match the number of calls listed. Funeral homes owned by Hassett received 33% of cases for unattended deaths from January through July this year per county records, more than double the second largest caseload, 15% belonging to Leeds Frey's funeral home.
We'll continue to work towards a resolution to improve and increase the transparency of the data that's available to us.
Denise Burley was the county's director of public health and spoke to us before she officially retired earlier this month. She's heard concerns. Part of her job was to make sure Serenity Memorial Group followed the scope of services detailed in the county's contract. An important nugget within Mohave County's request for proposal for medical examiner services says no preferential treatment. Logan Elia, an attorney with Rose Law Group, explains.
And that provision is specifically designed to prevent any conflict of interest or any acting on a conflict of interest and make sure that everybody plays fair with each other, especially when we're talking about the distribution of public funds.
Based on the agreement, no preferential treatment can be used in choosing a funeral home for a decedent.
If there's evidence that he's not following the terms, then in my mind, there's nothing that would prevent the county from auditing compliance.
I've told my family, if I die, I don't care where you drag my body, just make sure it's not in Mohave County.
This woman does not want to be identified. She says she's a former employee of Serenity Memorial Group. Through documentation, we verified that she worked for the company earlier this year.
There was no real training. It was just you go in, you figure it out, and that's that.
The ex-employee tells us she assisted with autopsies and transportation of decedents, and she claims she witnessed chain of custody issues.
Sometimes there was calls and they would leave bodies at one of John's funeral homes. He'd call them substations. He would do that from anything from an overdose or suicide to homicide cases. They would sit in different coolers, not at the medical examiner's office, sometimes for a week.
According to a research report on death investigations published by the National Institute of Justice, a properly maintained chain of custody and prompt transfer will reduce the likelihood of a challenge to the integrity of the evidence.
Your mortuaries are used as substations with the same type of equipment as what you would have at the medical examiner's office?
Same type of equipment and but the mortuaries are not, they're in no way associated with what we're doing.
Hassett says the substation strategy is about safety due to long drives between cities in Mohave County.
If an investigator feels that they are tired or can't make the drive down to Havasu and back to their return area, they have the ability to drop a non-high profile case off at a substation for transport the following day.
So you're saying these substations are not at desert lawn mortuaries at all?
That they are not. No.
They are at facilities that are just made for substations?
Facilities that the contractor owns, but they are not part of his funeral home businesses, correct?
At the medical examiner's office, it's very closely monitored the temperature of the coolers because at certain degrees, bodies start to decomp. If you have to run labs at certain temperatures, you can't get the same accurate results that you're going to need to determine whether it was an accidental overdose or somebody killed them.
And County Supervisor Buster Johnson says he received complaints himself.
We were having problems with bodies being picked up and not taken to the medical examiner for a day or 2 or 3, which is just not acceptable to me and not acceptable in any practice I've ever heard of.
He was the lone no vote against the county's deal with Serenity Memorial.
And yes, I expect that there would be expediency in moving those bodies from the substation to the medical examiner office, just because that's where they should be.
Hassett says improvements can always be made. He's open to suggestions, but he has a response to his critics.
If people focused on their own business and their own issues, think of how much better we could serve the community.
The former public health director also told us a decline in deaths over the past year could factor into funeral homes receiving fewer calls. But that doesn't change the discrepancy in statistics these mortuary owners claim exists. Long term, I'm told the county does want to bring in-house medical examiner services, but how long will all of this take? For Fox 10 Investigates, I'm Justin Lum.